Welcome to the Art of Conscious Living TV. I'm so very pleased to have my guest today, Ana Holub. She's the author of Forgive and Be Free. And I'm going to be speaking about her book, her life, and so much more. Welcome, Ana.
Thank you, Victoria.
How are you today?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
Well, great. Let's start from the very, very beginning, how long it took you to write this incredible book.
Well, it took what I thought was a long time. It took at least 6 years for me to write it.
6 years, so it must have been an incredible cathartic experience and a lot of research.
Yeah, well, it just took me being able to have the time to write it, and then getting an agent, getting a publisher, and then adding extra things at the end, and it just seemed to take a long time, but it was worth it.
Well, tell me about yourself. You are essentially, you go into prisons, you go into schools, you go to corporations, you also hold personal retreats, and you do one-on-one counseling with people.
Right.
And it's basically to bring people back to the easy oneness of unification of self, of not being fragmented and in the despondency and into the negativity. How would you describe it?
Well, I feel myself to be a peace activist. So everything I do is about bringing more peace onto the earth, and I start with myself. So I actively work this forgiveness process that's in my book for my life, and then as I got deeper and deeper into it, I wanted to share it. And my background is in peace education, so I've been doing a lot of different kinds of education for, as you mentioned, different crews of people for about 20 years.
So when you go into the prisons, you take this into the prisons, what is it like, that experience? And do you actually bring in the forgiveness program or the peace program?
Yeah, I have done a lot of violence prevention and work with gender, and particularly men who are batterers in prison. So we've been working with domestic violence issues. And when I first started at the prison, I couldn't really talk about forgiveness. It just wasn't, it was too hot a topic. But then gradually, as I think the world became more ready to talk about forgiveness, then it was okay to talk about it with the prisoners as well as the other people in my clientele.
So why was it so difficult at that time and it's easier at this time to talk about forgiveness?
That's a good question. I think originally there was a real hesitation on the part of the nonprofit I was working for to talk about forgiveness because it seemed to be too soft on crime. If we're working with the prisoners, and yes, we're rehabilitating them, but forgiveness for themselves just seemed like it was over the edge. It was too radical. And maybe the victim services people would get up in arms and there'd be problems with getting enough funding and that sort of thing. So I had to talk about other things for several years. But now I think with the victim offender education projects that are happening, there's just a lot more openness for forgiveness now than there was, say, 12 years ago when I started.
And I would think that is where all the power lies and a lot of answers lie there and a lot of resolve is there. It's the two words would be forgive and gratitude. Mm-hmm. And when you couple those two words together, this is to me this is the be all and is all. And if one is ignoring forgiveness, then really, well, let's clarify. Let's clarify what forgiveness is and what it is not.
Good idea, because the forgiveness that I talk about and that I wrote about in my book is an expanded model of forgiveness. It's not the traditional model that we were taught as kids. Oh, say you're sorry, oh, it's okay, and then you sort of rumble on that way in some way. And there is no map for us in a traditional forgiveness model. So in the expanded version, it's much more about how we can experience ourselves as directly linked to the oneness of God, however we want to describe that, and let go of anything, any fear, pain, sorrow, anguish, despondency, despair that we are walking around with, and really release that to spirit.
So essentially, I would think it would start with the person first, and then secondary to the person who has offended that person.
Well, self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others are both really essential. Mm-hmm. I find that the self-forgiveness spot is the most tender, most poignant area of our entire lives. If we can forgive ourselves for the things that we feel guilty or shameful about, then we'll have an incredible amount of peace that just can't be accessed without it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about forgiveness, because it brings us to peace. And that's why I'm a peace activist.
Well, I would also think that if something has gone, a terrible experience has happened to oneself, and you start to forgive yourself for going through that experience or having that experience, you soften all the edges of that. And when you can do that, then you're able to do that to others easily. But if you cannot do that to yourself first, then how can you forgive others?
Yeah.
So if there's a hardness about that you have gone through this and you cannot let it go, and you're mad about it and you're angry about it, and you still got high, hard emotions about it, then I cannot see possibly how anybody can forgive another person. Mm-hmm. So it all starts with oneself, within oneself.
Yeah, well, I would say that it starts within ourselves, absolutely. And whether we choose to, in our readiness for this work, focus on somebody outside of ourselves first, or within ourselves, something that we did, it works both ways. You know, whenever we're ready is when we do this work. No one can force us into it. You know, so when we are ready, then we can focus on whatever is arising in our lives that needs the support and the forgiveness and the healing.
So at this time, you're working with the Juvenile Detention Center, and the groups are from what age, 13 to 18?
Pretty much, yeah, okay. About that. Usually they're a little older than 13. Sometimes they go up to 19 in the Juvenile Hall, where I live in Siskiyou County.
Okay, well, share your experience of what's going on with the juveniles, and when they first come in and they've done a lot of mischief and crime, and they have a lot of attitude, and they have a lot of behavioral dysfunction.
Yeah.
You meet them at that place right where they are at. Tell me about that. What is that experience like?
Well, when I first did this class, I just ran my third group with the victim offender education group. I also teach peace education, conflict resolution there, and I also have taught poetry in Juvenile Hall. But the victim offender class is the most difficult one because the kids have to contend with what they did. They have to talk about their crime, and we work with all the impacts, the ripple effect, right, of the crime itself. So they don't want to do that usually. And I'm finally getting my feet under me to be more and more effective as I do it. And each group of children is different. It's very important to remember that even though most of the kids are big in terms of, you know, they're 17, 18-year-old guys usually, and they are capable of violence, they are capable of being sexually active, they usually are, they're using drugs a lot, and they have a huge attitude.
Yes.
So to get through to that and get through to them, it takes a little while.
So essentially they're coming in and they're at a place where they're feeling justified that what they've done is, it's all about them, and they feel that they are okay with doing that. And what I'm hearing you say is that you could bring them to a new place of understanding. Let's see it from the people that you have hurt. You've gone into their store and you've robbed their store and you upset their store. What about their families? What about their parents? What about the dependents of these people who are the store owners?
Right, and the children's families also. The youth have families that are impacted. Mm-hmm. The youth themselves are impacted. So we talk about their crime from 4 different levels. One is the impact on the victim or victims, the impact on their family, the offender's family, the impact on the community at large and the impact on the youth themselves. So it takes a while. We do some artwork, we do some breathing, we do some movement sometimes, and we talk a lot about what happened. So I asked them, okay, when the day you were brought in here, what was going on? Back up and tell me about the crime, but tell me, who were you living with? How drunk were you? Were you doing other drugs? Where was the decision that you made to go rob this store? And then why did you wreck it all up on top of it? And we talk about it. And it needs to be done without judgment. So that's where I need to be very open and loving with these kids, but I need to be really upfront and kind of tough with them at the same time.
You have to gain their trust and become a comrade with them.
Right. So we don't have that conversation right away. I build up to it. Mm-hmm. And I also speak to them about apology and forgiveness. So it's a beautiful thing.
So when you say meditation, that's perhaps these juveniles have been exposed to that for the first time in their life. This is something really, really new to them. They may have heard about it, but they've never really sat with it.
Yeah. They're learning to slow down and tune in, just like the rest of us are. And the Juvenile Hall in my county, Siskiyou County, I've got to say it's a great place. The people who are running it really care. They've gotten a lot of grants for a lot of great programs. So those kids get a lot of counseling in a lot of different ways.
Is there one story of one juvenile that really stands out that was an incredible success story that you saw, that there was that moment of complete awareness that came to that individual of what they were doing and what they were doing before and what they were going to do now and how they saw the whole picture at one pivotal moment? Is there one person that stands out without naming that person?
Right. Well, there are a lot of incredible moments that just flashed before my eye when you said that. I would say there's one young man who's in there now, whom I just worked with, and he was so high and so drunk at the same time that he barely remembers his crime. But he told me and the group as much as he could about it, and it was incredibly destructive. He went in and wrecked some high school property. So he did about $65,000 worth of damage in, I don't know, half an hour, maybe less. He set fire to some things and he stole some things and he just went nuts. And so then by the time he got into my class...
This young gentleman, he did $65,000 worth of damage in such a short time. He was very drunk, very high. He hardly remembered what he even did.
Yeah.
And
so when I first talked to him, I was a little worried. And this happens sometimes, that the youth are actually, some of them are psychopathic, meaning that they may not have any regret. They may not contact that part of themselves. And I'm happy to say that this young man has been sitting in Juvenile Hall where he needs to be so he can think about what all happened. And he's deepening and growing up, and he got really clear that that's not what he wants to be doing. I think the $65,000 bill that he is supposed to pay, now how he's going to pay that I don't know, helped to wake him up. But he also discovered, oh, he really wants to be in the building trades, and he's got some talents, and he needs to go out there and get a job. And so I was very relieved to hear that coming out of him. The thing that I'm worried about with a lot of kids, though, in my area is the meth use, because that makes them really crazy, and they think they can do anything.
When you say meth, you mean?
Methamphetamine.
Methamphetamine, which is speed.
Yeah, it's a kind of speed that's made in bathtubs. I mean, it's very cheap, and it makes you feel like you could do anything you want, and they don't care. They were describing this to me. While they're on it, they don't care what happens.
They get this altered state of reality.
Yeah,
they feel like a supercharged, and they're disconnected from their consciousness and their feelings. And how prevalent is this meth use?
is very prevalent in rural areas like where I live.
Meaning, out of 10 juveniles, how many?
You know, I'm not sure because I think it depends on the group of kids. I have a child right now who's a senior in high school, and I don't think there are a lot of kids that are in his group that are trying that sort of thing. Different areas of the county, though, there are plenty of kids into it. So it's sort of having to do with where you live, what class you're in. It tends to be the poorer kids and the kids that are dropping out already. They're already not in school. They're already tuned out.
So does that go hand in hand with meth use and crime?
Yes, absolutely.
So
That's
in
what's
order
so
to
worrisome.
feed their drug use, they have to get money, so therefore they have to commit crime to get the money.
And
so
they don't
robbery
care
and
how they do it. And when they get in there, they get angry and they just wreck stuff just for the heck of it.
So then there seems to be a period where they have to go through detox.
Yes, they do.
And how long would that take?
Well, I think it depends on the kid. And it's not nearly as bad as coming off of heroin. And I actually was talking to them this just a few weeks ago about this. The difference between coming off of meth versus coming off of heroin. A lot of them, they're bored and they haven't been really challenged and they've checked out. So reaching them with the breathing and with the ideas that I have about life, I think is really important.
Right. My understanding of boredom, when people say they're bored, is automatically, I associate that with that they are disconnected from themselves. Mm-hmm. When you are connected to yourself and connected to your heart and connected to your deeper awareness, how could you be bored? There's so much life going on there. It's so life-sustaining and life-giving and life celebration is sitting there. But when you are bored in the state, you are totally not knowing yourself, then you're open for anything, and anything is negativity that's going to be there to amuse you.
And I just pray that they don't hurt themselves or other people while that is happening.
So it sounds like they have not had the right nurturing that they could have had with their parents, and as young children.
Yeah.
There's something very deficient there. Do you bring the parents in? Do you do group counseling with the teenager and the parents? And
not in my program, no, but it does happen sometimes, especially when the child comes out and is on probation. But that I haven't been doing that, although I would love to.
But essentially, because they're going to go back to that given situation when they leave the juvenile hall, so they're returning back to something that was making them like that in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
And some of them are parents already, and some of their parents were about 15, 16 when they were born. So they didn't have real adults helping them. And any way that I can help them, I want to. I fall in love with every kid, every time.
Right. And you plant the seed, whether it comes to duration at this time or later, at least there's a seed planted within them.
Right. And I have to remember that for myself. And I think people who work in these kinds of difficult fields, we have to remember that we're planting seeds, we may never see it germinate. So there's a lot of trust that we come back day after day and say, okay, I'm going to do it again. And just keep seeing the beauty in the person, no matter what. That's what I do.
Ana, I would like you to read something from your book that is really, it's very foretelling about your journey. In your book, about your 10-step process of forgiveness, it's a very autobiography too, because it's really, you sprinkled a lot throughout your book about you and your journey of coming to this writing of the book.
Yeah.
So let's hear this at the very beginning of your book. And it's just beautiful and it's very foretelling. So,
thank you. When I worked with the publisher who did a great job, Llewellyn Worldwide, published this book, and they wanted to cut this section. And I really had to lobby, I had to negotiate to get it to be in here. A lot of the forgiveness work is about finding the treasure within even the worst thing that ever happened. And these are spiritual treasures. So this is a story that did happen to me, and it's a metaphor, it's an allegory. It goes like this. It was summer. I was on a river trip with a group of women, all of us adventuring together on the Klamath River in far northern California, up near the Oregon border. I was paddling my kayak, drinking in the day, the beauty, the dappled sunshine glinting on the water's surface. Underneath, though, I was worried. What if I got tossed? Every serious river runner has to deal with this fear at some point. I'd been paddling the Klamath for years, a dozen times or more, managing to stay in the boat through countless rapids and getting pretty handy in the process. I'd gone swimming only once before, years back, but I knew at some point the river would swoosh my little body out of the boat again and leave me floundering in the rush and tumble current, because that's just how it is. You can't do a lot of river running without that experience, and the more I kayaked, the closer I came to the inevitable. I was lucky. It was a warm day. Coming up to a mid-sized rapid, I paddled hard to align my boat with the perfect slot to slide from smooth water into the churning torrent. As so often happens in whitewater, the slightest drop in my concentration would be my undoing. I darted a glance over to river right, making sure to avoid some overhanging branches, and then I put my focus back on the slot ahead of me. But that one glance cost me a microsecond I didn't have, and the river wasn't waiting around. I went sideways over the rapid, rolled upside down, and got shucked out of that little kayak so fast I couldn't even think about it. I was swimming, and that was that. The water was zipping me along, my bright yellow boat bobbing merrily off to my left. After the first shock of surprise, magic happened. I realized that the mighty Klamath River was holding me, carrying me, buoying me up, and I felt utterly safe in its embrace. Out of the blue, I began to cry. My warm, salty tears met the sparkling river water, and we celebrated the truth that in this moment, there was nothing wrong, nothing scary, nothing to shrink from or avoid, just warm water carrying me downstream. The river felt strong and steadfast, covering all of me but my upturned face and knobby knees. As it took me, I relaxed into the safety of it, still crying with relief and new understanding. It was a moment I will never forget. Kayaking or rafting can be a dangerous sport, and not every toss from a boat in swift water leads to an experience as ecstatic as mine on that wondrous summer day. Just the same, I learned a powerful lesson from the Klamath. All my fears, hesitations, and assumptions were laid bare in one drenching, cathartic moment when I realized they were not true. The lesson was powerful because I was so aware of the metaphor. The water embracing me was alive and teaching me to trust, just as every moment is alive, embracing me and welcoming me to let go, forgive my fears, and trust in life itself. That day, I found out that the river of life is also the river of love.
Thank you. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
So it seems to me you were open for that experience. I mean, this experience could have happened to you and you could have seen nothing from it or learned nothing. But there was a lot before this experience had happened to you that puts you in the right place to be open to seeing a lot from that experience.
Right. I could have missed it altogether.
Yeah.
I could have just flipped out and be frightened and then sort of calm down later. But instead, I just realized in that moment, oh, there isn't really a problem here. Let me relax into the river of life.
And essentially, we can hold this to any moment in time in our life, no matter what is happening to us, whether it's good, bad, awful, terrible, whatever experience. Don't invest into it so much. Don't get lost into the story of it. Just witness it. Be aware with it. Allow this experience to see how it's going to talk to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is also true that there are a lot of things that have happened in our past where we weren't so conscious, and I didn't, probably you didn't, most people. There are several things that happened that were really painful, and we weren't relaxed inside of it. And that's where the forgiveness of really learning to let it go, let it wash, and offering it to Spirit in order to get the lessons, in order to get the peace, in order to get the soul wisdom out of it. That's what this process of forgiveness in its expanded state is all about.
The soul wisdom of it.
Yeah, because really we see, once we have forgiven, that every single person is a child of God, and that on a soul level we haven't hurt anyone and we have not been harmed. So even though, yes, we do hurt each other and we can be very violent to each other and to ourselves on a human level, on a spiritual level, that is not occurring. And so the forgiveness process is a doorway. When we walk through that doorway, we can get to that spiritual truth, but not before we're ready and not before we're willing to do the inner work required.
What would you say to a person who has not had the experience of forgiveness, who really has not known that experience within themselves, or for other people? They're very much living in the area of judgment, and they're very rigid with their actions.
Well, one thing that I talk about in the book is an acronym called HOW. Like, how are we going to do this, right? HOW stands for honesty, openness, and willingness. So for any one of us that is stuck in judgment and blame, just being honest with how that doesn't really feel very good. It really doesn't. It's not a joyful place. It's not a fun place to live in. And we can do it as much as we want because we have free will. However, if we're really ready to say, okay, life's an experiment. I don't even know what this forgiveness thing is about, but let me just try it. Let me just see. That would be a good place to start.
So a good question to ask them is, how would it feel to be without that judgment? How would it? What would it be like? Let's be curious about that for a moment, and then they would feel that of such freedom that they would have.
There would be an opening. Even if we're not feeling it in this moment, we can actually kind of lean into the possibility of it and say, oh, well, do I want some of that? That looks pretty good. Feels good. And I would say, as beings of spirit, we all know about this forgiveness stuff. A lot of times as human beings, we have lots of layers on top, but we know. And that's the place that I talk to in the book. And all we need to do is take the layers off. And that's what the forgiveness process helps us to do. And it's not hard. It's not complicated. Everyone can do it. It just takes a little willingness.
Give me an overview of the steps within it. I think you have it under a 10-step program.
Yeah.
It's 10-step methods. Give me an overview of those 10 steps.
Sure. Well, it's even simpler. You can even see it in 4 steps to really boil it down. I always begin with prayer, and that is not a religious thing, but it is a spiritual thing. So it could be an intention. If a person says, no, I'm not into prayer, fine. You can pray or you can intend what you want. And the important part is to connect and to say, all right, now I'm going to do this forgiveness work. I'm going to put myself into a spiritual space. I'm going to welcome a sacredness so that I have help.
Something bigger than me.
Something bigger than me that is loving and compassionate and wise. Mm-hmm. Yes. So that's the step one, to welcome the support and be in the humbleness of, oh, I'm not going to do this by myself. I've already tried and it didn't work. I tried so many times and it didn't work. So now we're going to expand the opportunity and say, all right, I really need some help. Please help me. And I'm going to go to spirit. However we want to talk about that. You know, you can put it in your own language, whatever makes sense to you. So that's the first step. And the next few steps are all about being very honest with what's happening. We think of, all right, what's really bothering me? Where is the conflict? Where's the crime? Where's the grievance that I haven't let go of? Who's involved? What do I think about when I think of these people and what happened? It doesn't mean we have to wallow in it or recall all the details, but it does mean we need to bring it up so that we can really take a look at it. And that's why we need to be in a sacred space. So there's lots of compassion there. So then we get very honest. We feel the feelings. We take a look at the thoughts, that we're the ones that were recycling these thoughts. You know, it isn't somebody else. It's me for my stuff and you for yours, right? So we get very honest. Where is it in my body? Our bodies are reservoirs, and they hold all the glory and the beauty and the talents that we were given, and they also hold all of our fear and pain and unfinished business. So we look into our body and we say, oh, all right, do I feel this in my belly? Do I feel it in my heart? Where do I feel it? Maybe it's on my back, you know, as a burden. So we just get as much information as possible, and we see, you know, how have I been thinking about this? How have I thought about this over and over in different situations? It looked like different situations, but it triggered the same stuff over and over again. So what am I carrying? Then when we get full of that, we realize, okay, I learned as much as I can about that for right now. Then we get into the releasing, which is very essential for this work, to let it go. And with that, I use breath. So releasing with exhale breath and really offering to Spirit everything that is in our way, in between ourselves and deep peace. Everything that we found. So it's really, then at that point, it changes from forgiving the circumstance or the person and really just saying, I want to clear out. I don't want to live with this. Please help me. These are my burdens. I've been carrying this. Sometimes we've been carrying it for a really long time. So we breathe out, let it go, offer it to God, offer it over and over. And in the book, I have very descriptive support for how to do that. And I also do that one-on-one with people when they come to do sessions. Through
guided meditations?
Well, we need to bring the thing up and really be willing to sit with it, not run away from it. And then when we find it, really offer it to Spirit.
Mm. So what you're saying is really own it and take responsibility for it.
First.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about fear and love.
There are more steps. Can I tell you the rest of the steps? Because I wouldn't want to just leave it there.
What step was the last one there?
That's the step of releasing. And then after that, there's a pause where everything just gets really still. And it's nice to just be here in the pause. We've let go, that's enough for right now. Then there's the pause, and then there's really drinking in the goodness. So we use our inhale breath, we drink in, and we say, all right, Spirit, help me out here. Fill me up. Because we've made room. We've let the pain and suffering out of our bones and our blood and our cell walls and our memories and our nervous system. So after that, we've made room. And then we say yes, and we start drinking in the grace of God into our bodies and into our minds and into our life. So then we start getting all sorts of wisdom. Like, oh, I realize now. We start getting the treasures of why did this happen, and what do I need to know, and how can I relax in the middle of this? And that's the miracle. And then we end with a prayer at the end. So it's a prayer sandwich. Prayer at the beginning and prayer at the end.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it works. It's simple. Anyone can do it. We just need to be willing to do it.
Show up and do it.
Mm-hmm. Slow down, too, and make a sacred space for it. Respect the work. Yeah. And after it's over, the best thing that I found for myself and the people that I work with is to be really kind to ourselves. Really kind. So that we can keep integrating what just happened. And it'll happen over a period of days or weeks or months where more will come up, more realizations, maybe some dreams.
When you say kind, what's an example? Would it
Kindness.
Would it be also to be gentle with yourself?
Yes.
To be soft with yourself and to be curious, to be open and listen to the whispers of what's going to be happening.
Right. Because we're so much more open that we get much better contact with our intuition. But only if we stay gentle and kind and compassionate with ourselves. So that means that all the habits that come up, the mind chatter that isn't very nice, that happens inside of our minds, we have to go, no, I'm not interested. I want to stay with what I just did. I want to stay with this forgiveness. I want to stay with the juice that I got, the goodness. So that takes some awareness, some vigilance. And I have a whole list in the book about, okay, so how about you don't go get high or watch a bunch of TV or eat a whole tub of ice cream or whatever you might do to distract yourself. How about you don't do that and stay with this wisdom? So our habits are going to have to move over in order for us to get the full truth of what this work is about. And it can happen gradually, step by step.
And so it's a process of opening up the heart and opening up your awareness and undoing all of the patterns and the knee-jerk reactions that you may have. Your attitudes will change. A lot of major shifting will be happening. Yeah. And when this is going on, there is life, a beautiful, beautiful life waiting for you. And we find that once we've shifted our vibration, this is really an energetic process. So when we let go of the sorrow and the pain and the suffering, and then we receive the blessings, then we're walking around in a new vibration and new opportunities and things start happening. So it's like, oh, wow, I was kind of hoping something exactly like this would come, and here it comes, because now we're open to it. We might have missed it, just like when I was on the river, I could have missed that whole experience, but I was ready. Right. It's leaving the reactive mind alone and going to the mind of curiosity and possibilities, the mind of proactiveness and the mind of witnessing life, instead of being locked down and shut down into one mode, such as we were speaking about before, of the juveniles who are in a major, major crises of just acting out. So now they're being exposed to just being the mere presence of you. I'm sure that they're benefiting because they're not meeting people like you all the time. The people that they are exposed to all the time are going to be people who are quite nasty and quite attitude and quite negative. And now they're meeting somebody with such love and openness and non-judgment. Just your mere presence is going to be very, very healing for them. Yeah, thank you. It's about what's normal, you know, to them. And to many of us, myself included, I had a tough childhood, which I talk about in the book. There are a lot of stories about me and my life.
and also about other people who've given their permission to be in the book, and their identities have been masked. But there are a lot of human stories in the book of when do we use this? And when we get born into a family where normal is really difficult and shut down, and maybe there's an alcoholic in the family, or maybe there's mental illness, which was my experience, all kinds of things could happen. So this is all about saying, I want a new normal. I want a much better life. I want to have some fun. I want to have some joy. So what do I need to do? And it turns out that one of the very most simple, most deep, most healing things we can do is to connect with spirit and start letting go.
Well, let's talk about your childhood. You mentioned of alcoholic. Were both your parents or one of your parents?
No, they were not alcoholic. However, my mother was bipolar. So many years later, I found out that children who have one or both parents that are mentally ill experience a very similar life to children who have alcoholic parents or drug-addicted parents. The reason why is because the parent will be sober and available, and then drunk or high and completely unavailable. Or in my case, my mother was a lovely, wonderful person when she was feeling centered, but then if she got real high or real low, she disappeared. And then as a child, what I learned to do was I was tracking her. And I realized once I became an adult that I had no idea who I was, because I was so busy tracking somebody else. And I had to learn to come here and get aligned with my own center of being. And the forgiveness work really helped me do that.
So when you say you were tracking her moods,
Yes.
whether she was up or down,
Exactly.
or feeling sad or feeling mad or angry, and you didn't have any chance during a young child to get to know yourself and develop yourself.
Yeah, I only knew myself in terms of looking outside. I wasn't really very at home inside of myself because I was looking to see whether my mother was going to be in a loving mood or a fearful mood or an angry mood. And so that's what I learned to do. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until much later.
So at what age did you start to put all this together that you could really own your own life and start defining yourself?
Well, I was very attracted to meditation and yoga when I was about 18 and 19. So I started on my spiritual path then. I moved from New Jersey, where my whole family situation was, to Santa Cruz, California. And it felt like I had come home to heaven. I was so happy. And I also felt like I needed to move 3,000 miles away to get out of the craziness. So my way of dealing with it was just to leave. And I thought, oh, good, it's gone. Well, it wasn't gone at all. And in this forgiveness work, we learned that, all right, so whatever my story or your story was about the family, it has everything to do with me, for me. In my family, it wasn't just that I was a victim to my mother's mental illness, although it could look like that. I realized, oh, I needed this situation exactly how it was in order for me to wake up places that are asleep inside of me. And that's when I start feeling a lot more peaceful, when I take ownership of that.
That's very beautiful, that you're saying that you got what you needed, even though it wasn't exactly ideally what one would want it. You got what you needed to help yourself, to find yourself, to learn more about yourself, and to become who you really are.
Yeah, and what my purpose is.
Yes.
So I have compassion because I found the stuff inside of me. I have compassion for other people. That's why I can sit and be a counselor, a forgiveness counselor, with all kinds of different stories that people have and really deep hardship and grief. And I don't need to run away because I think, oh yeah, I found that in myself too. am not a stranger.
Yeah. You've walked in their shoes, and you know what it's like to be there.
Yeah, and I haven't walked in their shoes for every single situation, but underneath the situation, in the depth of the emotional stuff.
Right. There's a common thread with all of us.
Yeah.
Abandoning our emotions, numbing, shutting down because of the circumstances that are not favorable. So we all walk with that, so we can identify to that with each other.
Right.
And feel for that for each other.
And that brings me to my peace activism. This is what I'm doing to expand peace on earth. And I know that the people who have done this work, they start giving their love away, just like I am. And it has a ripple effect of positivity.
Fantastic. Where are you at with all your work of forgiveness? Where do you foresee that it could become different and bigger, or how could you add on to what you've already done in this book? Do you have glimpses of where it could be in the future?
Yeah, I do. Right now, I'm very interested in the combination of using the forgiveness work and the healing that comes from it with healing addiction. There are lots of different ways that we can be addicted to substances and ideas and our image and getting approval and our work. I mean, there are just so many different ways we can distract ourselves. And I really feel that working with people who want to maintain their sobriety, who are just beginning a sober path, that introducing this forgiveness work for them just really helps them on their journey of healing. And so I have been through 12-step myself in Al-Anon, and I've learned a lot. And the 12 steps are the same. This is what I love about 12-step. It's the same for the addict and the people around the addict, because we're all in it. It's not just, oh, you've got the problem over there. No, no, no. We're all in it. We need to do these 12 steps. I really honor that. And I feel that adding this forgiveness process that I've been given to share, which has its roots in radical forgiveness and also in Course in Miracles. So all of that taken together and then offered to somebody who really is sincerely wanting to get past their addiction experience, that it's really going to help. So that's where I'm going. There are some other things that I'm working with too. I'm a poet, and I want to get some more books of poems published. So there's creative things happening.
It sounds to me that a lot of people will benefit from it. A lot of people are holding a lot of stories that have happened to them maybe 40 years ago.
Right.
Some terrible things have happened to them, and they will not allow themselves to forgive themselves that they have gone through that experience. They're holding themselves ransom 40 years later that they have gone through that. So it's time to bring that energy in there and bring that loving forgiveness in there.
Yeah.
A moment ago I was talking about love and fear, and I noticed in your book and read in your book that it's about bringing the love into the fear. And it's so beautiful. It's something that people have not talked about. Everybody, what I've read and heard in the past is it's either you're in a love base or you're in fear base. But bringing the love into the fear is a beautiful thing. It's basically healing it and allowing it to go and nurturing it, where you allow the fear to diminish.
Yeah.
We're in a fear-based world. I mean, since the 9/11. 2001, and a lot of people are in that adrenaline energy of that, of the viruses and the war and the uncertainty of everything and the economy. It could take one down to their knees, basically. So let's speak on that of love and fear.
Thank you for mentioning that. In the Course in Miracles, it's very clear that we bring our illusions to love. So that's basically what we do in this process. The fears and the blame and the grievances and the recriminations, all that stuff that creates, basically it makes hard knots inside of ourselves. So we bring all of that and we offer it to love for healing. And when we do it that way, then we stop recycling all of that. It's like opening a valve and letting it all just pour on out. And it's an incredible feeling of relief when we learn how to do it. So my work is to teach folks how to do this, which is not complicated, so that when you need it, you'll have it. When you wake up at 3 in the morning worrying about the bills or about your health or about if somebody's going to break into your house, any kind of fear moment that you might have, you can apply this and it'll be inside of you. You can say, oh, wait a minute, let me just slow down, take a breath, say a prayer, get very honest with what these fears are, start offering them to Spirit, just keep exhaling, and then receive the goodness.
Yes. It's about finding the barriers that are blocking the love that's already there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and releasing them.
And releasing those.
Yeah, with our free will. Nobody's going to make us do it. We get to do it when we're good and ready.
Well, Ana, it's been an absolute delight and a pleasure and an honor to speak with you.
Thank you
so much,
Victoria.
I thank you very, very much for all of the great work you're doing and all of the great books that you will written so far and the books that will be coming in the future. I thank you, and it's been a great honor to meet you.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a blessing to be here.
Thank you. And from the art of conscious living, do take care of yourselves and take care of others.